Joined by the Treasury Secretary, Mr. Geithner. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you, Peter.
Let me ask you first of all about what S&P did. It's not every day that the creditworthiness of the United States is called into question. Did they make the wrong call? Did you try and talk them out of it?
I think the important thing, Peter, people understand is the right thing for the economy now is to lock in place reforms that bring down our long-term deficits. It's very important to do, and if you listen carefully, you hear Republicans and Democrats now agreeing that that's necessary to do. This is the right time to do it. So what we want to do is work with Congress over the next couple months to lock those reforms in place.
But on the basic call that S&P made, the negative outlook now for U.S. debt going forward, the right call or the wrong call?
Well, again, I spent a lot of time traveling the country, talking to businessmen. I spent a lot of time outside the United States talking to people. And, Washington's a hard place for people to read. And it's not surprising. Average people look at Washington, they say, they wonder, are our politicians going to get their act together? Are they going to be able to agree, given that they disagree on so many things, are they going to be able to agree on reforms that make sure we don't get behind this problem? And again, I think if you listen carefully, I'd be reasonably confident now that we have a chance to lock in what we agree on. And what we agree on is the importance of putting in place strong targets for savings, for deficit reduction over a specific time frame with enforceable limits. Again, because what you want people around the world to know is that Washington is going to go back to living within its means. And I think we can do this in ways that will make the economy strong over the long run. It's important we start that process now.
Enforceable limits. Are you suggesting that at the end of these bipartisan negotiations that will begin this week with the Vice President, that the administration, Republicans in Congress will be able to agree, for example, on the $4 trillion in deficit reduction that's been talked about so much in the three plans that are out now for consideration?
I think that's achievable. And I think that's what we should try and do. Again, and you said the right thing, which is if you listen carefully now, you say people have agreed, there's emerging consensus on how much we have to do, the scope and scale of what we have to do, the time frame in which we have to do that, and that's a good place to start. Now, we're going to disagree on a lot of things. And again, if you listen to Republicans and Democrats, there's some things that we're going to be far apart on. But I think our challenge is to make sure we take what we agree on and put that in place, ask Congress to legislate it, so Congress is going to live within those constraints.
So markets are listening, as you know, around the world right now. At the end of June, that was the president's own deadline. We'll see firm commitments from this administration, from members of Congress on those spending limits, but perhaps not the details on exactly how they get there?
Well, I think the more details you have, the more credible it's going to be. So again, what we want to do is to have details on targets for deficit reduction, targets for savings, ways to make those enforceable, so people believe Congress is going to live by them. That's the challenge. If we could do that, I think that would be a good signal around the world that, again, Washington is going to make sure that, as we always have in the past, faced with enormous challenge, that Washington comes together and does the right thing. And this is the right thing to do for the economy.
In the short term, will entitlements be part of that discussion?
Well, they have to be, of course. And I think the only way to do this in a way that's responsible is to do a balanced, comprehensive package like the president laid out, like what the Fiscal Commission has suggested, what this group of senators, bipartisan senators, are doing in the Senate as well. You have to do it in a balanced, comprehensive way. Otherwise, the burden falls too much on parts of the budget that can't sustain it. And again, if you want to make sure you protect our capacity to invest in things that will be important to growth in the future, like education, like innovation, if you want to make sure you're not adding to the burden on the middle class, you have to do this in a balanced, comprehensive way.
How do you reach a middle ground with Republicans on taxes? You've heard John Boehner say it's a non-starter. Even your talk about reducing the tax expenditures that are out there, for a lot of Republicans, that's a tax hike.
There's no way to do this without changing our tax code. And nobody who looks at the American tax system today suggests we should live with that tax code. So we should do tax reform that reduces these expenditures that disproportionately go to the most fortunate Americans. And think of it the alternative, Peter. Life's about alternatives. If you don't do that, then what you're forced to do is to either cut deeply into commitments we made to our seniors, to the poor, to the disabled, or you're going to ask me to go out and borrow trillions of dollars from China, from investors around the world, which we cannot responsibly do. So the only choice available to us is to do a balanced, comprehensive package with shared sacrifice for everybody, where the burden's spread broadly, and that requires that you make changes to our tax code through tax reform that will add modestly to the burden of the most fortunate small fraction of Americans that benefited so much from the Bush tax cuts and the last decade of growth.
Has the S&P action from yesterday complicated the debt ceiling vote coming up? Has it sped up, for example, the need to deal with that sooner rather than later, given the market reaction?
No, I don't think so, actually. But I think if you look at how the world views the United States right now, you can tell two things about the way the world views the United States. One is that there's a lot of confidence in the capacity of this economy to grow, to make sure that we can meet our commitments or obligations. You can see that in the price at which we borrow every day. But we have to earn that confidence. And the other thing is, again, as I said, if you talk to people, it's sort of understandable. Washington's a hard place to read. And it's hard for people looking in Washington to look past the political rhetoric and be confident that you're going to see politicians here do the necessary, do the right thing. But again, I think if you listen carefully, as you said, Peter, there's a lot of consensus now emerging on the importance of doing this, on how much we have to do. We have to make sure we translate that into action, because ultimately, people judge us by what we do, not just by what we say. And we have an opportunity now, over the next 2 months, to make some real progress on that, and that's the right thing to do for the economy.
Did you have to reassure some foreign buyers of U.S. debt yesterday that all is good, that their investment here in the United States is safe?
Absolutely not. Again, if you look at the price at which we borrow, there's a lot of confidence, and that confidence is justified, that America is getting stronger and that we're going to make sure we take on these challenges and start to address them. But again, we have to earn that confidence every day, and that's why it's important that the political leadership in Washington take advantage of this moment, building on what you saw the president lay out, the fiscal commission lay out, balanced, comprehensive, multi-year targets for savings, targets for deficit reduction that help make the economy stronger in the future.
Can you have a long-term deficit reduction plan in place before the 2012 presidential election?
Oh, absolutely. Again, and we have a chance to do that, to make progress on that just in the next couple of months. Now, we don't know exactly how much is going to be possible. It depends on the will of the people here in Washington to do that. But we have a good basis for doing that, and we can lay some foundations now for those reforms necessary to bring down those deficits.
A couple other topics before I let you go. Elizabeth Warren, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Why is it so difficult to find someone to run this agency? And is she on the list still as a possibility?
Oh, absolutely. She's doing an excellent job of bringing clear disclosure to Americans so they can make a better choice about how to borrow to finance a home, or to how to make sure they can responsibly borrow on their credit card. She's doing a terrific job making the case for stronger consumer protection, attracting talented people to stand up that agency. And this is very important for us to do, because we saw a financial crisis that caused devastating damage to average Americans, in part because they weren't given the basic protections governments need to provide, and we're going to fix that.
Final question. Europe's still dealing with its own sovereign debt crisis. Yeah. Is Greece going to have to restructure?
Yeah, I think if you look at Europe now, obviously they have some challenges ahead, but if you look at what the governments of Greece, of Ireland, and many others are doing, they are doing incredibly difficult reforms to help make sure they bring their deficits down, their economies are restructured, financial systems stronger. And that's a necessary condition for getting through this. But part of it, success requires that Europe give them the financial support for those reforms to work. And the leaders of Europe, and you have to take them at their word on this, because they have the capacity to do this, have said they will do whatever is necessary to make sure they can help those countries manage those challenges, get through this problem. But they're making some progress.
Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, as always, appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us here on Bloomberg.